of Parliament held on Thursday, 30 July 2020, as previously circulated, be taken as read and be confirmed. Does any member oppose the motion? As no member opposes, the motion is agreed to unanimously. Secretary General.
Communications from the Chair.
I welcome all honourable members to the final sitting of Parliament for this week. I also welcome all those watching the live broadcast and the live streaming of today's proceedings. Thank you for your continued interest in your Parliament. Thank you, honourable members. Secretary General.
Consideration of bills.
Honourable members, I now call on the Attorney General and the Minister for Economy, Civil Service and Communications, the Honourable Ayaz Syed Qayyum, to move his motion. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, pursuant to the resolution of Parliament on Friday, 17 July 2020, I move that the following consequential bills be debated, voted upon, and be passed. 1. Tax Administration Budget Amendment Bill 2020. 2. Income Tax Budget Amendment Bill 2020. 3. Value-Added Tax Budget Amendment Bill 2020. 4. Stamp Duties Repeal Bill 2020. 5. Service Turnover Tax Repeal Bill 2020. 6. Environment and Climate Adaptation Levy Budget Amendment Bill 2020. 7. Airport Departure Tax Budget Amendment Bill 2020. 8. Customs Budget Amendment Bill 2020. 9. Customs Tariff Budget Amendment Bill 2020. 10. Excise Budget Amendment Bill 2020. 11. Reserve Bank of Fiji Budget Amendment Bill 2020. 12. Accident Compensation Budget Amendment Bill 2020. And 13. Local Government Budget Amendment Bill 2020. Thank you, sir.
Second. Is there a seconder?
Honourable Speaker, sir, I beg to second the motion.
Honourable members, I now call on the Honourable Attorney General and Minister for Economy, Civil Service and Communications to speak to his motion. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, as alluded to earlier on when we tabled these bills, these 13 amendment bills, Mr. Speaker, sir, are related to the budget announcements that were made, and directly or indirectly. I'd like to very quickly summarize these 13 bills, Mr. Speaker, sir. The first one, the Tax Administration Budget Amendment Bill, Mr. Speaker, sir, seeks to amend the Tax Administration Act. Essentially, the bill amends sections 46 and 46A of the Act to provide for a more consistent and fair application of the audit penalties. At the moment, under sections 46 and 46A of the Act, if a person makes a false or misleading statement to a tax officer or omits any matter from a statement made to a tax officer which results in a tax shortfall or a tax benefit arising from overstatement, that person is liable to a penalty at the rate of 75% of the tax shortfall or the tax benefit arising from the overstatement, if the statement is made knowingly or recklessly or at a rate of 20% in any other case. The proposed amendments to sections 46 and 46A provide a formula for the calculation of the penalty at a standard rate of 15% per annum, but if the tax shortfall or the tax benefit arising from the overstatement occurs over a number of years, the rate will be calculated in the same way as an interest rate. The bill deletes section 46B of the Act, which is dealing with the imposition of 300% penalty for VAT evasion. The deletion is necessary as sections 46 and 46A of the Act address VAT evasion. The bill amends section 48(7) of the Act by deleting other than that imposed under section 46 At the moment, the CEO of FRCS is unable to remit in whole or in part any penalty payable under Section 46 of the Act. Mr. Speaker, sir, the proposed amendment changes this and allows the CEO to also remit in whole or in part any penalty payable by a person under Section 46 of the Act. Further, the proposed amendment will bring about a uniform treatment in dealing with types of penalties. The bill also amends, Mr. Speaker, sir, 116A of the Act to provide for consistency with other penalty provisions in the Act, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, the next bill is the Income Tax Budget Amendment Bill. The Income Tax Budget Amendment Bill seeks to amend the Tax Act of 2015 to introduce the following policy changes. The definition of capital asset is amended to include depreciable assets, replacement of definition of permanent establishment, exclusion from the application of non-resident withholding tax. Debt forgiveness will continue to not be subject to income tax as part of the COVID-19 budget response. Tax deduction to be allowed for fringe benefit tax. Again, this is an amendment to Clause 6. So essentially the list of deductions not allowed to ensure the fringe tax benefit does not remain a cost to business. FNPF deductions. Again, Mr. Speaker, sir, this is for the allowance of up to 10%, where you get 150% tax deduction. Clarification of rules on the disposable of depreciable assets. Increase in the ratio from 2 to 1 to 3 to 1. This is what we call the thin capitalization rules. Increase capital gains tax exemption threshold from 16,000 to 30,000. At the moment, is an anomaly. So if you are selling a property and they'll charge CGT on the land, but then they have income tax on the actual building itself. So this is to align that and bring it also in respect of the income tax threshold. Deferral of capital gains tax and reorganization, advanced payments of tax, and the tax incentive for cash donations to sporting entities recognized by the Fiji National Sports Commission. The members would note we just fine-tuned that. It has to be an entity that is actually recognized by the National Sports Commission. The next, Mr. Speaker, sir, is the Value-Added Tax Budget Amendment Bill. Again, Mr. Speaker, sir, this is in respect of VAT reverse charges. In this case, Mr. Speaker, sir, a reverse charge means that the liability to pay VAT is on the recipient of the supply of a service instead of the supplier of such a service. Mr. Speaker, sir, for example, if I engage the services of someone overseas, such as an IT specialist, a company does, I would be liable to pay VAT for the service once provided. This I would then be able to claim for when I lodge my VAT returns. I'm able to do this, make a claim, if I'm registered under the Act. A registered person is one whose annual gross turnover from the taxable activity exceeds $100,000. What the amendment does, Mr. Speaker, so is to remove the requirement for a registered person to pay VAT in such a case, and thereby no longer need to claim for VAT returns because these are services provided for somebody from overseas. So it makes it a lot cleaner. It helps them positively with their cash flow. Clause 3 of the bill amends Section 22 of the Act to exempt VAT on the supply of residential accommodation. As those of you know, who are landlords, some of you are in this parliament, would know that if you had a rental of over $100,000, there is VAT payable that's now been removed. Clause 4 of the bill amends Section 23 of the Act by removing provisions relating to the cancellation of registration of a person who supplies residential accommodation. This is further to the provision I've just read. Clause 5 of the bill amends the Act by deleting Section 27A of the Act, which provides for how a registered person is to be treated where a branch or division of that person's taxable activity is the supply of residential accommodation. All of these are related to each other. And the amendment to Section 3910 of the Act to remove reference to the construction of residential property for rent, as this becomes obsolete as a result of the proposed amendment. Mr. Speaker, sir, again going on further to Stamp Duties Repeal Bill, essentially as announced, Mr. Speaker, sir, this is very simple. It's a repeal of the entire Act, so the bill goes, so the Act actually goes, so it's now completely repealed to abolish stamp duty in Fiji across the board. There is a savings provision necessary to facilitate the transition out of the application of the Act because there are some people who would have already paid or in the process of paying, and how it deals with that. The next one again, Mr. Speaker, says also the repeal, which is the service turnover tax. As we've said, there's no more service turnover tax. So there's actually a service turnover tax repeal bill. Again, Mr. Speaker, sir, it completely abolishes the service turnover tax, as with the stamp duties. The next bill, Mr. Speaker, sir, is in relation to the ECAL, or Environment Climate Adaptation Levy, budget amendment bill. As announced, Mr. Speaker, sir, the rate has been reduced from 10% to 5%, and also the threshold has been increased. So previously, if you had a business that was listed to be part of the ECAL framework, if you had a gross turnover of more than $1.25 million, then it was applicable to you. Now we've increased the threshold to $3 million. So even if you're a small hotel, a small property that has a gross turnover of less than $3 million, you won't actually have to pay ECAL. The property won't have to facilitate that. And again, Mr. Speaker, sir, the ECAL reduction has an effect on a number of different other areas where ECAL was applicable, including those who earn more than $275,000 and the various other laws that falls within the category, including super yachts, etc. Mr. Speaker, sir, the next one is the airport departure tax. Again, Mr. Speaker, sir, the amendment seeks to simply reduce it from $200 to $100. The next one, Mr. Speaker, sir, is the Customs Budget Amendment Bill. There are three changes made to the Act. Firstly, currently under the Customs law, if a person is dissatisfied with the decision of the controller, the person may appeal the decision to the Court of Review. To streamline the process for the review of the controller's decision by the controller, a similar approach to that which is undertaken under the Tax Administration Act 2009 for decisions under the laws have been adopted under the bill. Under this new review process, if a person is dissatisfied with the decision of the controller, the person may instead first lodge an objection to the decision of the controller. However, if the person is still dissatisfied with the reviewed decision of the controller, the person has the option of appealing the reviewed decision to the Court of Review. So giving another avenue of appeal process to the person who is dissatisfied by the decision of the controller of customs. Second, currently there are procedures in place in relation to the arrival of any ship or aircraft in Fiji that must be undertaken by the master of the ship or aircraft. This includes procedures such as only landing or touching down in Fiji at airports or ports. At the moment, if the master of a ship or aircraft fails to comply with any of the arrival procedures outlined in Section 14 of the Act, the master of the ship or aircraft is liable to pay a fixed penalty but can remain in Fijian waters. With this proposed amendment, proper officers will now be empowered to refuse clearance if the master of ship or aircraft fails to comply with any of the arrival procedures specified in Section 14. The third amendment of the Act simply corrects cross-referencing errors in the provisions relating to customs rulings to provide clarity. Mr. Speaker, sir, the next bill is the Customs Tariff Budget Amendment Bill. Mr. Speaker, sir, as highlighted, this changes a number of tariff line items, Mr. Speaker, sir, and the members would have been given the amended tariff structures where you've seen the old rates and the new rates and where those changes have taken place. As we've said, it's over 1,600 items that have been reduced in tariff. There is still a continuation of certain line items to protect Fijian industries of development of various industries in Fiji. So if you look at, for example, Mr. Speaker, sir, if you're talking about meat, we're still protecting the piggery industry, we're still protecting the cattle industry and the sheep and the goats, etc. All the rates have remained the same. But what we've done a fine-tuning of it, if you like. There are certain meat products that are actually not made in Fiji, that are not manufactured in Fiji, for example, from meat. So, for example, things like, pepperoni, salamis, they are not actually made in Fiji, but they're actually imported. So, because there was a very rudimentary approach to the tariff structures before, if we, for example, wanted to protect the pig industry in Fiji, and the rate is 33%, or 32% I should say, then everything that was related to meat would be just 32%. There was no kind of nuanced approach to it. So because we don't make pepperoni, we don't make salami, we obviously can reduce the duty on that. So we've got separate line items now. So the pigs are protected, we've got Vunda piggery, etc., the Yangara, the beef, the sheep, Fiji sheep, that's all protected. But those, what we call the small goods, the delicatessen goods, they've been reduced. I mean, you'd be surprised the kind of meat that's there that we actually cater for. So things like turkeys, we don't grow turkeys in Fiji. So we don't rear turkeys in Fiji. So the duty on turkey, for example, has been brought down to 5%. But we're protecting our poultry industry, which is chickens. It's called Domesticus galalis. That's apparently what it's called, under the tariff code they speak. Now, so we've done that. However, all the other food items where there is no local production of it, we've reduced it. Mr. Speaker, sir, a few years ago we had completely reduced the duty to 0% on a number of fruit items, for example, things like, strawberries, what we call rock fruits, etc., that are not grown in Fiji. You would see now even things like nuts that people need to eat, almonds and what have you, we've zero-rated that also, because obviously not just the hotel industry, but our people actually eat it. So we've done things like that, Mr. Speaker, sir. Again, however, we protected some local industries like Food Pacific, Leyland's Fiji. They actually make sausages. So the duty rate of sausages have been maintained at the protective rates. There are other, for example, there's some very interesting scenarios we have. So there are two large manufacturers of biscuits in Fiji, but bulk of their manufacturing is actually for the export market. So they had 32% protection plus 10% excise in order to streamline processes. If you look, Mr. Speaker, so very rare occasions have we actually allowed excise. We removed excise. We still have a protective rate of 32%. Batteries, batteries for cars, there is a particular company called Pacific Batteries. Now, they don't make all batteries. So, for example, batteries that are nickel-ion, nickel, cadmium, lithium, etc., that are manufactured locally, we've reduced the duty on those batteries to 5%. For people who want to buy for the vehicles, etc. But batteries that are actually made in Fiji, because they employ Fijians, and we'll be actually looking at how effective they are, the duty rates have actually been protected for them also. We have a number of clothes actually that were protected. Most of the garment manufacturers in Fiji, when they make clothes, it's not for us. They essentially make it for the outside market. They make suits, etc. Most of the women's clothing that are ready-made actually are all imported. So the nice jackets that the honourable members on the other side wear, the female members, most of the jackets actually are made in Fiji. They either buy the fabric and get it sewn in Fiji, or the ready-made ones actually all are imported. Yet they pay 32% on that. So we've again taken a nuanced approach, saying, look, these things need to be reduced, and so we reduced it to 5%. Again, the baby garments, we have a lot of babies in Fiji. We had reduced the duty. It used to be 32% a few years back. We reduced it to 5%. We have now zero-rated it. Undergarments, women's undergarments, men's undergarments, kids' vests have all been reduced to 0% because we don't make them, but people need them. It's everyday usage. And Mr. Speaker, so again with footwear, there was, for a number of years, there's protection, but most of the footwear companies in Fiji no longer manufacture them. There's some of them that they do some. However, they themselves actually import the footwear. They may make a few, but they actually import that. So again, this is to give a better pricing to ordinary Fijians. Exercise books. Exercise books were expensive. There was some local protection given to a local manufacturer. But what we saw, because he was given a specific rate of duty for protection, so they weren't actually paying only percentage on the importation. If somebody imported it, they had to pay, like specific rates for $5 on one item, $3 on one item, plus the percentage. So because we want to allow for competition, of course, exercise books are really critical for students. The protection rates have been removed, and the 5% fiscal duty actually has been imposed on that. Again, long time ago, somebody's bringing in soap powder and just packaging it, so they gave them protection. It's no longer being done. So again, the duty rate for washing detergents, everyday usage, has been reduced from 32% to 5%. Again, Mr. Speaker, sir, there have been some protection for people who are making plastic in Fiji, like plastic chairs. Some of the protections actually continue. However, it's been reduced from 32% to 5%, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, a number of these items, and you can see that as we highlighted, the music industry has been completely all zero rated. A number of items that we do buy when people go overseas have been zero rated. Things like manufacturing of cables. There was only one company called Dominion Cables. We now have another company, I think it's called Pacific Cables, but they don't make these cables above a particular voltage. So just to protect them, we used to have 32%. So what we've done now, we added another line item saying, yes, there'll be 32% protection, but any cables above this particular voltage, because we know it's not made in Fiji, it's 5%. So it makes it easier for businesses. They don't actually have to go and make applications, etc. So that's the overall gist of it. And Mr. Speaker says we've highlighted there's over 1,600 items in that respect that we've changed. The next item, Mr. Speaker, sir, the next bill is the Excise Budget Amendment Bill. Again, Mr. Speaker, sir, it provides for the levying and collecting of excise duty on goods manufactured in Fiji. The excise levy is levied and collected on the following locally manufactured goods: cigarettes, alcohol, carbonated drinks, and sweetened beverages. Mr. Speaker, sir, as highlighted in the budget speak, that we're reducing the rate of excise duty on alcohol by 50%, of course allowing our hotels, etc., to be able to be competitive. We're also removing the excise duty on locally manufactured sweetened and flavored milk. We are all aware of the nutritional benefits of milk for children, which is milk in protein and so on. Of course, the argument being is sweetened, yet the fact is that we need people to get access to cheaper sweetened milk. Mr. Speaker, sir, as such, to make a variety of options of milk more affordable, we're not only reducing the rate of import excise duty on sweetened and flavored milk from 15% to free, but we're also removing the excise duty on locally manufactured sweetened and flavored milk. Mr. Speaker, sir, the next amendment is the Reserve Bank of Fiji Budget Amendment Bill. Reserve Bank of Fiji, Mr. Speaker, sir, this particular bill seeks to amend the Reserve Bank of Fiji Act in 1983 to increase the limit for outstanding advances holdings by the Reserve Bank of Fiji of notes, bills, securities, or other evidence of indebtedness of or guaranteed by the government and statutory corporations, and the credits established for the government and statutory corporations by the RBF. Excuse me, Mr. Speaker, sir. Clause 2 of the bill, Mr. Speaker, sir, amends Section 51 of the Act to allow RBF to increase the limit for outstanding advances, holdings by RBF of notes, bills, securities, and other evidence of indebtedness. Clause 2 of the bill also amends Section 51 of the Act to allow RBF to extend the limit referred to in paragraph 2.2 to a maximum limit of 60% of the average total revenue of the government. And Mr. Speaker, sir, there's quite a few bit of information. Quite happy to answer those questions, but essentially it seeks to increase the limit of that. The next one, Mr. Speaker, is accident compensation. Mr. Speaker, sir, Act amendment to that. The Accident Compensation Budget Amendment Bill, Mr. Speaker, sir, seeks to amend the Act to ensure financial reporting requirements under the fund are aligned to how trust funds are treated under the Finance Instructions Act 2010. Because as stated, the ACCF is actually a trust fund. Because all the levies that are collected goes into that. So we want it to be aligned to the Trust Fund Act, which was not actually aligned to that. So now we're going to have that aligned. Last but not least, Mr. Speaker, sir, under the bills that were tabled on the 17th of July, the Local Government Budget Amendment Bill, Mr. Speaker, sir. As we know, in 2016, the government changed its financial year from the calendar year to the period commencing 1st of August to 31 July the following year. Mr. Speaker, sir, we're now going to have this particular amendment that will allow the alignment of the financial year of the municipal councils to this, the government financial year. And secondly, Mr. Speaker, sir, is reducing the retirement age of officers appointed to municipal council from 60 years to 55 years. And this, Mr. Speaker, sir, will come into effect in 1 year's time. So they are the bills that were tabled on the 17th of July. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
I thank the Honourable Attorney General, and the floor is now open for debate on the motion. Is anyone wishing to take the floor on this motion. Honorable Biman Prasad, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank the Honorable Attorney General for the details that he's provided on all the 13 bills. Of course, Mr. Speaker, this is consequential bills. Approval is kind of a stamp of the final seal of approval on this budget. And of course, Mr. Speaker, the budget, of course, has been passed, and we need to look at these consequential bills. Mr. Speaker, I'm just going to pick on some of them. We don't have issues on a lot of the consequential legislation to give effect to the budget. But let me just start by making this general observation. If you look at all the tax amendments and the most of the 13 bills, Mr. Speaker, is really to do with the impact of these bills on the revenue, but also it's seen as an incentive, stimulus to the larger economy. Mr. Speaker, we have talked about some of these changes, changes in the tariff, for example, the application of VAT, the stamp duties, the repeal of STT, the tourism taxes. We talked about since 2015-16. And on many occasions, Mr. Speaker, we said to the government that some of these taxes, imposed, were having adverse impact on the businesses, especially on the tourism industry, the competitiveness of our industry even before COVID-19 were raised with respect to some of these taxes. But we know that the government was operating in a very expansionary mode over the last 5 or 6 years, and of course they needed revenue. And with the strict compliance, we don't oppose compliance, but a lot of the revenue measures that is now being changed and repealed and reduced, of course is going to have a big impact on the revenue collection. But this is what we had warned the government on many occasions, that it is not right to keep raising taxes. And one example that I want to pick, when we said, don't increase duties on alcohol every year. We had 3 consecutive years of increase. And we were ridiculed in this house. Oh, we are trying to promote this, trying to promote that.
You said to remove that.
But,
You said to remove that.
no, I talked about the excise duty on alcohol that you increased for 3 consecutive years, We talked about that. And I know some people on this side, the kind of comment that they were making. So the point is, Mr. Speaker, that this is not surprising. However, it comes at a time when the government is really actually being forced to do this, because we need to create stimulus, ensure that our businesses get what they want. But the timing, what they intend to get out of it, Mr. Speaker, is not necessarily going. Some of these things should have been done in a normal time. This is what we were saying. Let me, maybe you were also watching Bollywood movies, Honorable Wangani Bete. Yeah. If you look at the customs Tariff Act, Budget Amendment Bill. Of course, Mr. Speaker, without looking at all the details, nobody will complain about the major components of the budget, which is either zero rating or reduction of duties and excise of 1,600 items. But when you look at the list, it is really not focusing on the underprivileged, on the needy, and the most vulnerable, because basic items like rice, flour, tea, garlic, onions, as well as medicine, was already duty-free, but people will still have to have the burden of paying 9% VAT on them. And this is the government which promised the people in 2014 that they will never put VAT on the basic items. They did. So while the list of 1,600 items also have food items, an overwhelming majority of them can be termed as luxury food products and out of reach of those who survive on basic items. Mr. Speaker, for example, the duty on milk, and I know I've talked about this on many occasions in the past as well. It's still there because of the agreement that we had when we sold Rewa Dairy. And he's making a lot of noise, but he knows what's happening to the dairy industry in this country. He knows it. Yeah. Edible oil, for example, still carries a 15% duty with concessions available to retailers. Also lentils or dal, another basic food item, still carries a duty of 5%. Mr. Speaker, the same goes for medication. Medicine was also zero rated, but the prices will not change because VAT is still not changed. So it is very important for our people to understand what are some of the issues in this amendment. Mr. Speaker, the other components, when we look at the capital gains tax, Mr. Speaker, I'll let him talk to you first. Maybe he's watched Kader Khan last night, in one of the Bollywood movies. Yeah. The changes to the capital gains tax clarification, Mr. Speaker, is appropriate. We note the changes to the VAT and the application of that for supply of residential accommodation. Stamp duty, we note the repeal of STT, reduction of ECAL from 10 to 5%. Airport tax, reduction from $200 to $100. But Mr. Speaker, I want perhaps the Honorable Attorney General can clarify this, because Fiji Airways also had a pre-sale of tickets. So I'm assuming that the $200 that would have been charged, now that that has been reduced, they will be refunded the $100, because a lot of people have made inquiries with respect to that. Excise taxes. In fact, Mr. Speaker, on that I just want to point out, in the last, in the COVID response budget, the government quite, or perhaps in a very cryptical manner, also increased the tax on fuel. In fact, they increased it by 20 cents when that should have been passed directly to the consumers, to the business. And in fact, if you're looking at a stimulus budget, why do you want to raise the tax when the world market prices was coming down? They should have passed it on to the consumers. So when they went and said, oh, we're reducing the price, actually the price should have been reduced by another, diesel and the petrol prices should have been reduced by another 20%. It was done in quite a critical manner, and the government, tried to hide that. So perhaps, the government needs to consider that as well. The RBF Act, Mr. Speaker, we understand the changes because the total revenue of the government in this budget and the forecast budgets would be lower, and it makes sense for the Reserve Bank to raise the limit. But here I would want to also raise this issue, Mr. Speaker. While the banks are giving relief to the customers, by way of deferring payments, the banks have actually not reduced the interest rate yet. They should be, because the liquidity is going up. Banks are also holding back on lending, in some ways, and at the same time not reducing the interest rate. So, it's really not too much of help. Okay, it might be temporarily, but the customers will still have to pay. And I think this is the time that the Reserve Bank ought to ensure or use its influence to ensure that commercial banks, lending institutions actually reduce the interest rate. Because the Reserve Bank is going to put more money, presumably as a result of this change, and the limit has been increased. They would be putting out more money into the system. Banks will see further increase in liquidity, and therefore interest rate should go down. It's very important for the banks to understand that they need to play their part as well. With respect to the local government amendment, Mr. Speaker, again, I think this is ludicrous. At this time, in fact, in most of the local governments, the majority of the people who would be affected by this. For example, we've had information already. Almost 150 workers in the municipalities of the Central Division, Suba, Lemi, Nosori, and Asinu, will be affected by this policy, where government plans to reduce the retirement age from 60 years to 55 years. I mean, why do you want to do it now? You made that change in the civil service some years back. Why do you want to bring that to the local government act, local government employees now, when many of them, majority of those people are not people at the senior level. These are people earning $4, $5 an hour. And this is the time to give them confidence, to give them the assurance that they will have the job. I mean, you're making them anxious, and many of them would have made their plans for the next 2 or 3 years. Because come 1st August 2021, all those who are over 55 years old but yet to reach 60 years, and those reaching 55 years who are currently 54 will be retired, Mr. Speaker. Some will argue, illogically of course, that civil servants can retire at 55. Why can't municipal workers? That seems to be the logic, Mr. Speaker. But we have argued before, neither the civil servants nor those in the municipal workers, and we know how the retirement age was changed in 2009 through a decree. So, and many of these local government councils, Mr. Speaker, have collective agreements. Workers have collective agreements with the individual councils on on retiring workers at 60 years of age. So why then there is a need to legislate it now? I would urge the government to withdraw this bill, Mr. Speaker. Let the workers in the municipal councils deal with the local councils, individual councils, and as part of the collective agreement, get what they want. If government, for example, Mr. Speaker, allowed a 3-year time frame to have this discussion, we may be able to pass through this crisis, and the workers will have a much better period of time to plan the exit from the employment that they have. So I find this local government amendment quite ludicrous, and actually it's going to be a kick in the guts of those workers who will have to retire in the next 1.5 to 2 years. The other point that I want to make, Mr. Speaker, is the consistency of some of these changes. And let me come back to the customs tariff act. Actually, I'm not sure how the government cannot see the contradiction. I was quite surprised that the Honourable Minister for Trade, talked about how the negative impact of Paisa Plus could have an effect on my own view, Mr. Speaker, with respect. This is kind of a trade liberalization policy where we are reducing tariff rates quite drastically on a wide range of products. That in itself, I think, would make Paisa Plus negotiation in many ways quite redundant. So I can't see the connection why we are not having a good discussion. In fact, we should have concluded. I think the whole trade negotiations are all over the place. We had some time back that there was. We had some time back, Mr. Speaker. We had some time back. We had some time back that there was a feasibility study being done to look at Fiji-China free trade agreement. We don't know where we are, but I think, Mr. Speaker, it is very important for us to look at where we are with Australia and New Zealand at the moment, because I think this is one time, while we've done this is one time that we need to look at why we should join Paisa Plus, why we should sign the agreement, why we should negotiate with Australia and New Zealand. In fact, Australia and New Zealand, Mr. Speaker, also have an opportunity, because they also have a responsibility. This is the time for them to call the shots, to bite the bullet, and provide a much better framework for labour mobility, for trade within the Pacific countries. And we've talked about how Australia and New Zealand is very important for the Pacific and for Fiji. You can do better than that, Honourable Minister for Health. You can do better than that. Yeah, you can do better than that, instead of that ridiculous, interjections. So, Mr. Speaker, I think it is very important for us to look at Paisa Plus, and this is an opportunity for Fiji to negotiate better. We have taken steps on our own with respect to trade liberalization in a sense. This is the time to look at the negotiations. So, Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, I want to say that while we support all the other bills. We cannot support the bill number 13, Local Government Amendment Act, and I urge the government to withdraw that bill. It is not going to have an impact on the material substance of the budget. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I thank the Honourable Viman Prasad. Honourable Nikonawai Kula, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good morning, Honourable Speaker. I would like to contribute. The motion that is before the House is asking us to approve a total of 13 consequential amendments to support the budget which we have already passed. My comments, or I'm correct to say that from this side of the House, we will not be making any objection to that, but we raise concerns in our duty to make the government accountable. We have passed the budget, and from our side, during that process of the debate and the committee stage, we have asked or requested the government to do this and do that. I know we asked that we reduce the expenditures, but they said no. We asked to reduce the deficit, but they said no. But I want to touch again on our request for government to stimulate the primary industries, which the government refused again. Honorable Speaker, if you look at other countries, including Japan, they put a lot of emphasis on the primary industries, agriculture, fisheries, and things like that. Never mind that they have become big manufacturers. So that is one of the reservations, the concern that we have in holding the other side accountable. We look at the budget of the Ministries of Fisheries, the Ministry of Forestry, and the Ministry of Agriculture. In totality, the total of what was given to them to stimulate them was 3 million. But that was not to look for new export projects. They were mainly to maintain the status quo. So we don't know how they will stimulate themselves from their allocations now. They should be empowered. We talk about pawpaw, we talk about coconut, we talk about vanilla, we talk about cocoa. We need to develop all this. So I'm asking the other side, especially the Ministry of Agriculture, why didn't he not ask the Ministry of Economy to please empower that side, empower his ministry, so that they can develop even more for export? And I referred especially to the plans that Ratu Mara had it. Well, when I spoke here, he promised, I will explain. But his contribution to the whole budget was simply a rebuttal. He did not say anything about his ministry. Well, by the next session, the budget allocation would already been done. So he will not be getting more, unless he's looking for aid. Unless he was looking for aid. Honorable Speaker, I was here when he spoke, and he spent the entire 20 minutes rebutting everybody and talking nothing about his ministry. And I'm saying here, again, he should do more. He should do more. It is a very essential ministry. It is a very essential ministry. Yesterday was committee. Yesterday was committee only. His contribution to the budget was nothing. He did not talk about agriculture. He did not talk about pawpaw. He did not talk about any new things. His allocations, he did not talk about vanilla. Those allocations for those were continuous. He did not talk about Dalo. He did not talk about Yangon. He did not talk about Duruka. He did not talk about breadfruit. All these things.
Order. Order.
Well, I'm very sorry for you what you're doing now. In total opposite, we have a lot of respect to his predecessor, Honorable Inia Seriratu.
Order.
Of all the plans that Honorable Inia Seriratu, put up, he came in and he wiped them all out. He brought in his new ideas. And where are we in the agricultural sector? We're going down and down and down.
Order.
No, but my point, Honorable Speaker, is that now we're doing our role now. We have to hold you accountable. I can have tea with him outside.
Order.
I can hold his hand, but inside here, I will criticize him because that's my job. I'm paid for that. They pay me $50,000 to criticize you. I have to do my job. I have to earn my keep. So the whole point there, Honorable Speaker, accepting that the budget has been approved, we are very, very sad. I cry for you. Yes, I cry for the ministries of primary industry. I cry for the Minister for Fisheries. I cry for the Minister for Agriculture. I cry for the Ministry of Forestry. Because they had nothing. We did not empower them. Of the 2.7, I will pray to. I cry, I pray, and I will sympathize for you. Well, if they should have asked me to go and see the Minister for Economy on their behalf. So maybe I can persuade the Minister for Economy to give them more money. Because you can't do it. He was more concerned, Minister of Economy was more concerned on empowering tourism. And he forgot about the primary industries. Sad for this. Well, moving forward, Honorable Speaker.
Honorable member, just stick to the consequential bills. Forget about the minister.
Yeah. I forget about them because we passed. When we passed the budget, we forget about them. So the budget has now been passed, and they refused. They refused, no, we won't take. So my whole point is that, yes, you have the mandate, we respect you for that, but now, moving forward, we now have to hold you into account. One of the concerns that we have is enforcement. We have a lot of duties reduced so that items will come down. But what guarantee is there that the poor person in the village will feel them? One example is this. Beer is coming down. But now, in the villages, they don't need sombu. They just pick up the phone and call Samsung, get some carton beer and pay for it because they have enough money. The question is whether this benefit will go down to them or the person in Laos. And there's not enough procedure or enforcement procedure to ensure that. And one guarantee would have been if we have complementary amendments in the price control. So we have more items to be price controlled so that it will ensure that the poor people, the very poor, will also benefit from this. Finally, Honorable Speaker, my concern also is in relation to the local government amendment. This is asking for changes into the submission of annual accounts. It is also asking for the reduction in the ages. And the point I want to say here is that, please, the local government is local government. We give them the right of self-determination in relation to decision-making. For how many years now? We have almost nationalized them. They have almost become a department. They should be respected. The decision-making process independently should be respected for the reason that they are local government. So those are the concerns that I wish to raise. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
I thank the Honorable Niconoy Kula for his contribution to the debate. Honorable members, Honorable Ngawaka, you have the floor.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Honourable Speaker, I just want to speak a bit on some aspects of the bills. And generally, Honourable Speaker, what we have now is a huge reduction in taxes and charges and fees that I believe is placing this country on a better platform in terms of developing its economy. It has been a long time coming. I think there was a time there when fees and taxes and whatnot was being introduced almost as if the good times are not going to end. But now it has ended. It is time to face reality and hence the budget and the bills that we have today. And hopefully this is the platform on which the country can rebuild its economy. I know in my previous life, once you reduce your tariff, your rates, it takes a long time to climb back to what it used to be. And but I don't want to see us increasing the deposit tax to $200. I'd like us to keep it at 100 and all the other charges that have come down. Honourable Speaker, I agree with my colleague, Mr. Honourable Biman Prasad, about our trade deal with Australia and New Zealand. I think that should be rectified and signed ASAP to see that we are to strengthen our relationship in this part of in our region. Honourable Speaker, something that always mystifies me is the interest rates by the bank and their willingness to lend. I've asked a number of economists, and so what can we do to get the banks to lend at this time and reduce interest rates? And they said it's the confidence of the banks in the governance of a country. That is, Honourable Speaker, is something that we need to look into. And government, and the way we do things in this country, Honourable Speaker, needs to improve. The banks increase their rates as a way of mitigating the risks. And as I said earlier, it is to do with the governance of the country. For this week, Honourable Speaker, with the parliamentary sitting, I think the whole country had a sense of joy that their leaders could meet like this and indulge in the debates and show in the country that we are a free people who can debate and who can have dialogue on the basis on the way we do it here in this parliament. And I like if you saw the media reports for this week, it was very balanced. I think on Monday and Tuesday it was a little rough on the other side of the government, but on Wednesday it has changed. It has changed. They got some positives, and I think the whole country likes to see that. And by extension, that gives the confidence to the banks to lend and to relook at the interest rates, because the night lending rates from RBF is only 5% now, I think. It's 1.5%. It has come down to 2.5. It's much lower, but the interest rates are still high, and the confidence is still not there to lend. So really, it is the confidence in the way the country is governed. And when we ask some questions, we are told that almost like we don't have any right to those replies. Like yesterday, I asked the Honourable PM about the Bisdemur, and he said, it's going to happen when it happens. But the people in my area want to know when, and he could not come up with a reply. So that reflects very badly on the way we do things, and hence affects the confidence of of the institutions in this country. So, Honorable Speaker, we now have a budget approved, and we expect this government to go out and govern properly. Govern properly. Govern the country properly. You have governed this country during good times, but now it is we are facing difficult times. So go and do it properly. That's my plea to them, and I believe our party leader had also articulated that to the governments. It's been given to you. Go and do it properly. So, Honorable Speaker, the budget is passed. Consequential bills will pass. My plea to the government from this side of the House: go out and do it properly, and get the confidence that we need, so that the whole community, especially the banks, can start lending and start generating the activities in our economy. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
I thank the Honourable Member for his contribution to the debate. Honourable Attorney General, you have your right to reply.
Thank you, sir. I wish to, just for clarity's sake, we all need to be very precise here, but I just need to respond to a couple of issues that have been raised. Mr. Speaker, sir, unfortunately, Honourable Namaikula again deviated, but just to highlight regarding agriculture, he obviously does not look at the big picture. The agriculture sector, the Ministry of Agriculture has received an increased budget. You don't simply look at the budget itself. There are so many other factors. Various tax incentives, duty reduction on all the agricultural inputs have all been reduced. And of course, he needs to also understand, if everybody today in Fiji went and planted dalo, it won't be a viable industry to get into, because the price of dalo will come down. There will be a glut in the market. You need to value add. You need to be able to find markets for it. At the moment, the world is shut down, half the world is shut down. So your ability to go and market is limited. These are the ground realities. So please, you need to understand, Mr. Speaker, so just very briefly, Honourable Biman Prasad raised a number of issues. I just need to address that. They said, we've been saying this about taxes, etc. Despite the so-called increase in taxes, Mr. Speaker, sir, which were actually consistent. When we introduced ECAL, we remained at 10%. When we introduced STT, it remained at STT. In fact, we are the only ones that brought down VAT. So there's no inconsistency, no a year-to-year increase. Yes, alcohol and cigarettes did go up. Yes, Mr. Speaker, sir. But they wanted to bring down the price of lamb chops and beer at election time. This is not election time. He did it just before election time. You see, the timing is very different. So you try and appeal. You try and appeal to people at election time, I'll bring down the price of beer and lamb chops. We are not appealing to anybody. What we are simply trying to do is make sure that the economy and the policy decisions made in the economy is actually the correct reaction and indeed placement for this particular pandemic. That's what it is all about, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, please, Honourable Prasad, this would have been much clearer if you had an alternative budget, but obviously you don't. Mr. Speaker, sir, the other point about it was that he talks about the tariff rates, and I think somebody else mentioned that it does not affect the underprivileged. Mr. Speaker, sir, the reality of the matter is, which they have never recognized, over the past number of years, for a number of the areas, in particular for food items and everyday items, we have continuously, wherever possible, have reduced tariff rates. We actually have done that. We've gone down further. We've now done widespread industry consultations. We are meeting different stakeholders, right from meat suppliers to people who are manufacturing sausages, all sorts of people making cables. We recognize people in Fiji, for example. I mentioned in the budget, there's Pinto Industries in Vanuatu. Honourable Bulitavu, you need to be aware of what Honourable Gavoka is saying, Honourable Prasad is saying. They're saying, because we've reduced the tariff rate, let's go and sign the PESA Plus hook, line and sinker. What we are saying, no. We need to do it on our own terms. We are doing it on our own terms. Because the whole philosophy of PESA Plus, Mr. Speaker, sir, the whole Speaker, I know you did the consultancy on liberalization, trade liberalization for the Forum Secretariat. But Mr. Speaker, sir, the fact of the matter is, that when you go to negotiations, you need to be able to say, look, we have certain industries in Fiji, they are what we call infant industries, or certain industries that are for domestic purposes, we need to protect them. Or you wean us off it over a period of time. These are the negotiations that have been taking place, the discussions have been taking place. As the Honourable Prime Minister said continuously, we have not shut the door. We have not shut the door. Same thing with IPA. And PESA Plus is only in relation to Australia and New Zealand. These tariff reductions is to all the countries in the world. To all the countries in the world, we're saying, look guys, over here is 5%. These ones will continue to provide protection because there are Fijian jobs at stake, or we have a particular comparative advantage. We may progressively go off it. That's what we are doing. We're setting things on our own terms. That's the difference. Mr. Speaker, sir, but what they also don't understand, that liberalization is also to do with various laws in Fiji. I'll give you a very classic point. If you go to a supermarket in Australia and New Zealand, you can actually buy vitamin C at the supermarket. You can buy various vitamin pills, buy it off the shelf. In Fiji, unfortunately, the pharmaceutical companies and the drug the related boards, they've had a stranglehold. We're trying to liberalize that. Why shouldn't ordinary people have access to vitamin C and other vitamins in supermarkets? Because supermarkets can actually buy them in bulk and they'd be a lot cheaper. The unit cost would be a lot cheaper. So the working class person can go and buy vitamin C, can go and buy those vitamins. These are some of the areas that we are working on. It's not all on surface. That's the kind of liberalization, the kind of structural changes we are doing, that we are looking at. And I also want to reiterate, I mean, things like what we've been doing, you know, sanitary pads, all those personal items. Over the number of years, we've reduced duty, zero-rated duty. Now, undergarments for children, for women, for men. These are everyday items. They are not luxury items. Poor people have to wash their clothes too. They need to wear underpants too. They need to wear a vest too. They need to buy raincoats for their kids too. They need to buy shoes for their kids too. They need to buy a toothbrush, toothpaste. All of these items. They stand here and pontificate and say that they're concerned about the poor people as if the poor people only are in rags and only eat some basic food. That's the picture they're trying to portray. We want them to have dignity. Don't say no, because that's what you're saying. That's what you're saying. You have not provided an alternative view, nor have you recognized what these tariff structures have done or will do. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, the other point, of course, that I'd like to make is that the Honourable Prasad talked about fuel. Yes, we did increase the duty on fuel because we also need revenue. It's a fact. When you don't have VAT, when you don't have ECAL, when you don't have tourists coming in, when you don't have STT, when you don't have departure tax, we still need to provide the services. This parliament, their staff, civil servants all need to be paid for. Unlike you, unlike your recommendation, we did not reduce civil service cuts, pay cuts. We've continued with civil service salaries, Mr. Speaker, sir. We need revenue. But you see, the point is, no, we're not lying. But the point is, you read the Fiji Times article. The point is, we increased the duty on fuel at a time when the world fuel price was plummeting. At the time when the world fuel price was plummeting. So despite the increase in the duty, the price of fuel still reduced for the consumer. It's still reduced. Of course, now it's slowly going up. But the fact of the matter is, it does not affect them on their daily lives. Diesel price came down. Bus fare, therefore, should have come down too. Mr. Speaker, sir. So we have done it at the right time, Mr. Speaker, sir. You know, please don't feign, sympathy for municipal servants when you said let's pay cut the civil servants. Let's have the pay cut for them. The reality of the matter is, the Honourable Minister for Local Government will do. They're trying to modernize the municipal councils. That'll mean eventually higher pay rises. Some of these people get paid very low salaries. Just the entire restructure, modernizing it, mechanizing it, Mr. Speaker, sir. The other last few points I want to make was, a lot was talked about the interest rates. The way that interest rates were, at the moment, Honourable Gawaka, the RBF lends to commercial banks is 0.5%. at 0.5%, and there are certain loan facilities that the RBF lends to the banks at 1%. So, for example, there's an allocation of, they lend money at 1% for those people who are buying their first homes. And then those commercial banks can lend that money for no more than 5%. So there are certain home loans that are at 4.2, 4.3%. Of course, we would like overall the interest rates to come down. But there are a number of determinants. Government cannot go and intervene in the market. But there are various ways that it will happen. As everybody knows, that the term deposit rates were very high. So when the term deposit rates are very high, in other words, when you go and put your $10,000 and you say, I want to fix it for 2 years, or 1 year you pay me 6% interest rate, that 6% that you are getting will mean that somebody, when the bank uses your $10,000 to lend to somebody, it will be higher. But when the term deposit rates actually come down, and people are getting off those term deposits, and the market adjusts itself, then of course the lending rates will subsequently get lower, and you will see in the next few months that the lending rates will come down. But as I have highlighted, there's a number of debts that are going bad for the banks. They have to make provisioning. Honorable Nawai Kula said, oh, we did for tourism industry, nothing for the villages. You go down half the Coral Coast, all the people in the villages are employed in the tourism sector. You go to the Mamanudas, all the villages are in the tourism sector. So obviously it affects them directly. People in Savusavu do. So please, don't have this sort of very black and white dichotomous approach. There's nothing like that exists. The reality of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, sir, that we have a sophisticated economy. People work in different parts of the sector. So obviously the tourism sector contributes very largely to the GDP. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, what we're seeing is that with the term deposit rates coming down, you'll see the lowering of the interest rates. In fact, there's been an overall increase of 0.5% for new loans for the banks. Mr. Speaker, sir, very quickly in respect of the other matters that were raised, I wanted to make the point about the milk products Honorable Prasad raised. Yes, there's still protection being provided in certain areas, and Honorable Prasad knows, we've discussed this at the Public Accounts Committee level. There is an agreement in place. That agreement comes off in 2 years' time. We had a 10-year deal. That protection rates will come off in August of 2022. And then it'll be reduced to 5% for everybody. You know that. I mean, ask Lodiers. You mix around a lot with them. They'll tell you about that rate. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, the reality of the matter is that the farm gate price that Honorable Minister for Agriculture will tell you is a lot more than what it ever used to be. The farmers to the cooperative as Class B shareholders in Fiji Dairy are getting a dividend every year. They never used to get dividends every year. So this is the kind of concoction that they have in place, Mr. Speaker, sir, regarding this. Mr. Speaker, sir, I think that's all I'd like to say in respect of the notes that I had made. Our last point I want to make also, Mr. Speaker, sir. Honorable Gavoka talked about confidence. And this is not, self-adulation by government, but we have received extreme positive response by 9 out of 10 people. In fact, probably 9.5 out of 10 people. Ordinary people, civil servants, business investors, in respect of the budget. Because there's a particular vision that's been laid out. Honorable Tambuya yesterday, raised the issue, and I didn't get an opportunity to say, the Prime Minister's residence, we can't have people living in, opulence and all that kind of nonsense. He's not going to live in it. Nobody on this planet Earth lives forever. All of us are mortals. We will die one day. You will die, I will die, Honorable Prime Minister will die. Whoever is the next Prime Minister will occupy that office. It's for Fiji. It's an asset for Fiji. But we are building this because, Mr. Speaker, sir, it was what you call a ready-to-shovel project. There will be people employed, as the Honorable Prime Minister highlighted in his speech. We'll be having, in fact, the guys in the construction sector are saying, with the projects that we've highlighted, there will be at least 1,600 new jobs created. 1,600 new jobs being created. People having money in their pocket. People from the informal sector will have money in their pocket. So that's the kind of thinking that goes behind. The confidence building is when we come to this parliament and we're able to be positive about it. Of course, you can question things, but we need to be able to look at it from a nationalistic perspective. We need to be far more nationalistic about it because no other time in history has the world faced this kind of pandemic and the deleterious impact it has had on various economies, trade, work, employment, etc. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, with those closing remarks, I'd like to urge all members to support these 13 consequential bills. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I thank the Honourable Attorney General for his right of reply. Honourable members, the Parliament will now vote. The question is, pursuant to the resolution of Parliament on Friday, 17 July 2020, that the following consequential bills be debated upon, voted upon, and be passed. 1. Tax Administration Budget Amendment Bill 2020. 2. Income Tax Budget Amendment Bill 2020. 3. Value Added Tax Budget Amendment Bill 2020. 4. Stamp Duties Repeal Bill 2020. 5. Service Turnover Tax Repeal Bill 2020. 6. Environment and Climate Adaptation Levy Budget Amendment Bill 2020. 7. Airport Departure Tax Budget Amendment Bill 2020. 8. Customs Budget Amendment Bill 2020. 9. Customs Tariff Budget Amendment Bill 2020. 10. Excise Budget Amendment Bill 2020. 11. Reserve Bank of Fiji Budget Amendment Bill 2020. 12. Accident Compensation Budget Amendment Bill 2020. And 13. Local Government Budget Amendment Bill 2020. Does any member oppose the motion? Yes. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say nay. Nay. The ayes have it. Secretary General.
Following bills. 1. A bill for an act to amend the Tax Administration Act 2009, Bill number 14 of 2020. 2. A bill for an act to amend the Income Tax Act 2015, Bill number 15 of 2020. 3. A bill for an act to amend the Value Added Tax Act 1991, Bill number 16 of 2020. 4. A bill for an act to repeal the Stamp Duties Act 1920, Bill number 17 of 2020. 5. A bill for an act to repeal the Service Turnover Tax Act 2012, Bill number 18 of 2020. 6. A bill for an act to amend the Environment and Climate Adaptation Levy Act 2015, Bill number 19 of 2020. 7. A bill for an act to amend the Airport Departure Tax Act 1986, Bill number 20 of 2020. 8. A bill for an act to amend the Customs Act 1986, Bill number 21 of 2020. 9. A bill for an act to amend the Customs Tariff Act 1986, Bill number 22 of 2020. 10. A bill for an act to amend the Excise Act 1986, Bill number 23 of 2020. 11. A bill for an act to amend the Reserve Bank of Fiji Act 1983, Bill number 24 of 2020. 12. A bill for an act to amend the Accident Compensation Act, Bill 2017, Bill number 25 of 2019. And 13, a bill for an act to amend the Local Government Act 1972, Bill number 26 of 2020, enacted by the Parliament of the Republic of Fiji.
Honourable members, on that note, we will suspend proceedings for refreshments in the big committee room. Parliament will resume in half an hour. We suspend. Honourable members, Honourable Speaker. Honourable members, please be seated. Secretary General.
Consideration of bills.
Honourable members, I now call upon the Attorney General and Minister for Economy, Civil Service and Communications to move his motion. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, pursuant to the resolution of Parliament on Wednesday, 29 July 2020, I now move the Telecommunications Budget Amendment Bill 2020 be debated, voted upon and be passed. Thank you, sir.
Is there a seconder?
Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to second the motion.
I now call on the Attorney General to speak to his motion. You have the floor, Honourable Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, as announced in the budget address on the 17th of July, we are now removing the data levy under the Telecommunications Act. That data levy, Mr. Speaker, sir, was introduced last year to set up a distinct funding mechanism to support projects aimed at national development in relation to information and communications technology. Money collected from the data levy went into the Telecommunications Development Trust Fund, established under the Telecommunications Trust Fund Regulation 2016 for the continued development of Fiji's telecommunication industry. However, Mr. Speaker, sir, we have had discussions with the telecom companies. They have agreed to continue, but in a different manner, and to keep things simple for the telecommunications industry and support our long-standing commitment, Mr. Speaker, sir, to streamline the sector's regulations. We have opted to remove the data levy and instead increase the current 1.5% revenue-based telecommunications license fee prescribed in accordance with the Telecommunications Licensing Regulation 2012 to 2%. Of this 2% amount, 1.5% of the percentage point will be collected as normal, but the remaining or the additional 0.5% point will be funneled into the development fund to ensure continued development of our telecommunications infrastructure and projects. Mr. Speaker, sir, as the members would also know from the budget, we talked about this, under Head 16 for connecting the unconnected project. This allocation is for mapping project to further clarify the black and brown spots of internet connectivity, which are areas where there is no mobile phone connection, which is black spots, or pockets of unconnected areas in between, which are the brown spots, which have intermittent reception. Mr. Speaker, sir, this will require significant infrastructure development. However, with these funding streams in close coordination with the telecommunication industry partners, we are confident we are able to further cement our standing as a telecommunications hub. So essentially what it will do, put it simply, at the moment the law is that they've been paying for all these years since the Telecommunications Authority of Fiji, they pay 1.5% of their gross turnover to the TAF fund, which is being used to connect black spots, etc. Now what we'll be doing is getting rid of the data levy and increase that 1.5 to 2%. And that out of that additional 0.5%, that'll go directly to the data, to the trust fund in respect of developing connectivity for example, telecenters, etc., that we've been putting in place, Mr. Speaker. So that's what this Act simply seeks to do. We have, Mr. Speaker, sir, as I highlighted yesterday too, there are a number of areas in Fiji, and I've got the list here, where we've identified. A lot of it is to do in well, there's about 3 areas in Lakondrove, about 2, 4, 6, 7, 8 key areas. These are the black spots. In Lau, Madhuata has about 2 areas, Lomaiviti quite a few actually, Kandavu quite a few, Navosa and Naitasiri about 3 main areas where there are what we call complete black spots. And then of course, Mr. Speaker, sir, we've got some brown-out areas where we will be actually getting a lot more connectivity in that respect. So essentially, Mr. Speaker, sir, this bill just seeks to get rid of the data levy, which will now stop, but also in respect of the current 1.5% will go up to 2%, and that 0.5% will go towards the connecting the unconnected. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
I thank the Honorable Attorney General. Honorable members, the floor is now open for debate on the motion. Honorable Linda Tambua, you have the floor.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I thank the Honourable Minister for explaining the purpose for this amendment to the Telecommunications Act, and we welcome it. We actually are speaking on behalf of SEDELPA that we welcome this change. This was debated quite profusely last year, and as you know, we opposed it. And at this time, I just want to commend the government for this. I think during this time of COVID, we can safely say that while many other industries are losing income and money, the internet giants and companies have made a lot more money from data use. So this is welcomed. I just, however, want to make a suggestion to the government for future reference. This has been done in a few countries around the world. And these are a tax that can be introduced to tax the internet giants that are now making or doing a lot of business on the internet, such as Google, Apple, Facebook, and Amazon. A digital tax, it is called, something for the government to consider. In July 2019, France passed a law, a digital tax law, where they taxed these internet giants based on their sales that happen locally within France. And this was done really because while the internet companies who complained a lot about this increase in the 10 cents last year felt it was unjust, they did suggest or hoped that the government would look at taxing these internet companies that do a lot of business online. So, Fiji is not exempt from that. We are now doing a lot more online businesses and using these platforms, selling our goods on these platforms. And the sales that's generated from that are currently not taxed. So it is a suggestion for the government to consider. New Zealand is following suit. So in November 2019, they have been discussing the similar digital tax to be enacted because these companies, they use our consumer data, our daily consumer data to sell online advertising. And so that would be the suggestion for future reference to generate revenue, for the government and for the country to consider a digital tax in place. So we do commend the removal of this levy on data so that, our internet companies continue to provide this service to our consumers at an affordable price, but do recommend highly the consideration of this digital tax on these internet giants that are making billions of dollars of revenue from online businesses. But to that end, Honourable Speaker, I do support the motion before the House on behalf of this side of the House. Thank you, Honourable Speaker.
I thank the Honourable Member for her contribution to the debate. And I give the floor to the Honourable Attorney General, who is right to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, just by way of clarification for the Honourable Member, that's a completely different type of tax. What the Honourable Member is actually talking about is about taxing large multinational corporations that perhaps are registered in different countries and don't necessarily pay tax. The case in point that she may be saying, may be referring to, a lot of you would have been watching Netflix. You pay for Netflix through your credit card. That money is paid to Netflix, but they don't actually pay any taxes in Fiji. It's a very global issue. Fiji is actually a small fry in all of this. And at this point in time, the point of difference between that and this is very different. When we introduced this levy last year, Mr. Speaker, so again, the whole point was to be able to try and gain some revenue for a trust fund. We've been in we've been in communications with the mobile phone companies, Vodafone, Digicel, and TFL actually, and in fact, Fintel also could be part of this, where they've agreed to actually increase the amount of money they'll pay, 2% of the gross turnover towards this levy, and we've discussed with them 0.5% will go specifically to developing telecenters, etc., which gives us continuous flow of income. It's completely different to what Honorable Tambuya is saying. And of course, some of the larger countries are dealing with this. At this point in time, we would actually like to attract Google to Fiji. We would like to attract business from those kind of multinational corporations. This is the reason why the Honorable Prime Minister agreed to move our trade commission from LA to San Francisco. San Francisco is where you have the Silicon Valley. There's a lot more opportunities for our businesses, and in fact for our ability to gain inroads into the Silicon Valley. We have a young population. They're very, technologically savvy. There are things like coding, etc. Unfortunately, prior to the COVID-19, we were in discussions with a couple of people from the Silicon Valley to develop courses at FNU to teach our young people coding, so then they can actually provide services to these companies without necessarily having to move to the Silicon Valley. That's a new way of doing business. So we like to develop more relationships with those types of organizations. For example, we were in Bangladesh last year. Samsung, for example, when they develop all these apps, etc., they do it during the day. At night time, they send whatever they've developed to Dhaka, to the capital in Bangladesh. All these young Bangladeshis are sitting all night trying to troubleshoot so they can fix up the issues. By the time then they go to sleep, they send it back to Seoul or wherever in Korea Samsung is based, and they start working on it too. So that's the opportunity we see for our young people, and we hope to further that once this pandemic is sort of out of the way. But I'd like to thank her support for this, and I'd like to urge all members, because this will actually help us to connect those who are unconnected. Thank you very much. I'd like to also, sorry, Mr. Speaker, sir, acknowledge the support and the endorsement by the telecom companies. Thank you.
I thank the Honourable Attorney General. Honourable members, Parliament will now vote. The question is pursuant to resolution of Parliament on Wednesday, 29 July 2020, that the Telecommunications Budget Amendment Bill 2020 be debated, voted upon, and be passed. Does any member oppose the motion? No. As no member opposes, the motion is agreed to unanimously. Secretary General.
Bill for an Act to amend the Telecommunications Act 2008, Bill number 27 of 2020, enacted by the Parliament of the Republic of Fiji.
Secretary General.
Consideration of bills.
Honourable members, I now call upon the Attorney General and Minister for Economy, Civil Service and Communications to move his motion. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, pursuant to the resolution of Parliament on Wednesday, 29 July 2020, I move that the Fiji National Provident Fund Budget Amendment Bill 2020 be debated, voted upon and be passed. Thank you, sir.
Is there a seconder?
Honourable Speaker, sir, I beg to second the motion.
I now call on the Honourable Attorney General to speak to his motion. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, there are two aspects to this particular bill. One of them, of course, is to address the reduction of the FNPF contribution from the 10% to the 5% and the 8% to the 5%, and the continuation of that additional 12 months. The second aspect, Mr. Speaker, sir, I think is very important because it will affect over 400,000 members of FNPF, active members. What this bill seeks to do, we've been in consultations, of course, receiving a lot of public feedback, and so is FNPF. At the moment, the pension scheme is very inflexible, and if I could elaborate, once a person turns 55, or for example, when a person becomes medically incapacitated and they're able to access or all their funds, or somebody who becomes a beneficiary under the FNPF because the principal has died and they've now received the sum. When a person turns 55, or when they wish to sort of say that, okay, I now want to access my funds, because some people continue to be members of FNPF even after 55, they can opt to take out the entire retirement savings. In other words, they can do the entire lump sum withdrawal. They take it all out, that's it. Or they can opt to purchase a life or a term annuity product, that is a pension. Or they can opt for a combination of both. In other words, part lump sum payment and part pension, for life or term. So if you say for life, you say I want to be paid for the rest of my life. And they'll calculate the amount you get until you die. If you do a joint, in other words, you do it with your spouse, then he or she gets continued to get paid after that too. Or you can say, I want it for a term pension. You can get it for 5 years, 10 years, or 15 years. So some people say, well, look, I don't think I'll live for past the next 10 years. So I want my pension, to enjoy my pension, I want it for the next 10 years. So they calculate and they pay that out to you. Now, once you choose these options, you cannot actually change it. You're locked into it. Obviously, if you've withdrawn all your funds, you've withdrawn it. There's no more. If you've gone for term, you've gone for term. And that's a set amount. If you've gone for your annuity, then you get a particular period that you're locked in for. This new product will be called the drawdown account, will be an additional retirement income product, giving FNPF members an additional option to choose from. And this has been signed off by the actuary for FNPF, which is Australian-based and indeed approved by the FNPF board. As I said, that because it does not give you the flexibility, because there are some people, for example, once they get on a pension, assuming 3 years later, they want to go overseas for medical treatment. They can't get a lump sum payment. So they're locked into that. Assuming they may want some additional amount of money, maybe they want to help their child, or whatever the case may be, they are locked into it because you now receive only the fixed amount. So I'll give an example. So if I turn 55, I have a balance of 100K in my FNPF account. I decide to then purchase a single life annuity product, which means I take out a single life pension. My pension entitlement would be calculated in accordance with the Act, which mandates an annuity conversion rate of 8.7% for 55 years age-based pensioner. This means that I would consistently receive a monthly pension of $725 for the rest of my life. But if I need to take out more money for medical expenses or whatever to withdraw the balance of my 100K savings, at some point in time, I would not be allowed to do so, because that's the three products. Now, what we want is, of course, the flexibility. The drawdown account, Mr. Speaker, sir, would allow holders to receive a regular income from the accumulated savings in a manner that releases capital as well as earn investment return, but allows them to withdraw. So what it can mean is that, for example, if I turn 55, and I then say, I want my balance to be put in this drawdown account. The drawdown account then will actually accumulate interest. And I may say I want to be on a pension, say I want to say on an annuity, so I say for the next 10 years. But in between, if I want to draw down, go and draw down $30,000, I'll be allowed to do so. It gives you that flexibility. So the actuaries have actually signed off on it. So the drawdown account holders will earn interest rate at the same rate as the FNPF members. The interest rate for the drawdown accounts will be the same as the credit rating for FNPF members' accounts. This simply means that the interest rate declared to FNPF members will also be declared on the balances of those with the drawdown accounts. For the last financial year, the interest rate is 5%. FNPF members enjoy the distribution of the interest. Drawdown account holders will also enjoy the same going forward, Mr. Speaker, sir. So essentially, Mr. Speaker, sir, what it does, it gives FNP, the pensioners themselves, the pension to be, the opportunity, to be able to get that flexibility built into their savings that they've accumulated up to the age of reaching 55. And in fact, I've got the statistics here. There are about 41,000 people at this point in time who are over the age of 55 but have not accessed their FNPF accounts. They continue to work or they've decided not to touch it at all. So these people can also enjoy the benefit of this new product. And there's about another 400,000 soon-to-be pensioners, ranging from the age of 16 all the way up to 55, who also can enjoy this particular product. So this amendment, Mr. Speaker, sir, seeks to allow that flexibility to our would-be pensioners or people who want to draw down their accounts by availing a fourth new product that will be available to the pensioners. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
I thank the Honourable Attorney General. Honourable members, the floor is now open for debate on the motion. Is anyone wishing to take the floor? There being no one wishing to take the floor?
Sir, I'd like to thank the members for their support. This will be very good for those people who are members of the FNPF. Some of you are soon to retire too, so it gives you that flexibility in respect of the funds that you can access and how you can access. So I'll thank you for your support. Thank you. Naka.
Honourable members, the Parliament will now vote. The question is, pursuant to the resolution of Parliament on Wednesday, 29 July 2020, that the Fiji National Provident Fund Budget Amendment Bill 2020 be debated, voted upon and be passed. Does any member oppose the motion? As no member opposes, the motion is agreed to unanimously. Secretary General.
A bill for an act to amend the Fiji National Provident Fund Act 2011, Bill number 28 of 2020, enacted by the Parliament of the Republic of Fiji.
Secretary General.
Consideration of bills.
Honourable members, I now call upon the Attorney General and Minister for Economy, Civil Service and Communications to move his motion. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, pursuant to the resolution of Parliament Wednesday, 29 July 2020, I now move that the Business Licensing Repeal Bill 2020 be debated, voted upon and be passed. Thank you, sir.
Is there a seconder?
Honourable Speaker, sir, I beg to second the motion.
I now call on the Honourable Attorney General to speak to his motion. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, as announced in the budget on 7th of July, we are now abolishing the business licensing regime to make it easier for ordinary Fijians to do business, and of course other people coming to Fiji too. It has, of course, been part of our colonial heritage. The business licensing system has proven to, of course, be quite lengthy and indeed quite bureaucratic. There's no doubt there's quite a lot of improvement had been carried out in respect of the time it used to take for business licenses to be approved. We found that at one point in time, certain municipalities used to actually ask for an application fee on top of the business license fee. However, Mr. Speaker, as we've seen, in many of the developed economies, in particular those who are quite high up in respect of ease of doing business, like New Zealand, they have actually removed business licensing requirement. However, the focus will be on people to register their business. So even if I want to open up Citeri's cleaning services, Citeri has to simply go and register the business name, or if she's got a limited liability, and registers that, and off she goes and starts her cleaning business. She doesn't have to go to municipal council or anywhere else. Somebody wants to start up, John's Clothing, John can simply go, needs to register. Of course, everybody has to have a tax number, and then they start off their business. As highlighted in the budget, though, that there are certain areas that you will need further approvals. So, there would be called some of the high-risk areas like they have in New Zealand. If you want to open, Sunita's restaurant, then Sunita simply cannot go off and start a restaurant because the Ministry of Health people, the health officials need to make sure that she complies with the health regulations. She can't be cutting the meat on the floor. So those are the types of areas that you have intervention. Or, for example, somebody selling in different parts of the town, They simply just, can't go and say, well, now I no longer require a business license. I can go and sell in the middle of the roundabout. You obviously can't do that because there's certain regulations around that. But of course, you want to start up a business in a shop anywhere else, you can do that. Mr. Speaker, sir, the other point that I also wanted to highlight is that there's also been a coordinating effort through the Ministry of Commerce, Trade and Industry in respect of making sure that we get approvals done really quickly, as announced in the budget also, that any of the businesses, any initiatives that have been, that will attract the incentives that we announced in the budget, for example, tax incentives, we'll work closely with Ministry of Economy and FRCS to hold hands to get those developments up and running. We have also, as a way of offsetting some of the revenue loss for municipal councils, because some municipal councils actually made a little bit of money for their operating expenses by business license fees. Like small towns like Taguas of the world, etc. We've allocated $200,000 in the budget to help them supplement their loss of income, at least for a period of time. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, the Business Licensing Repeal Bill seeks to repeal the Business Licensing Act 1976 to abolish the system of licensing of businesses. The 1st of August, Mr. Speaker, sir, which is quite historic, all of it is tomorrow, will mark the end of Fiji's business licensing regime. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
I thank the Honourable Attorney General. The floor is now open for debate on this motion. There being no one wishing to take the floor, I call upon the Honourable Attorney General to speak in reply. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I have nothing further to add. Thank you.
Honourable members, the Parliament will now vote. The question is pursuant to the resolution of Parliament on Wednesday, 29 July 2020, that the Business Licensing Repeal Bill 2020 be debated, voted upon and be passed. Does any member oppose the motion? No. As no member opposes, the motion is agreed to unanimously. Secretary General.
Bill for an Act to repeal the Business Licensing Act 1976, Bill number 29 of 2020, enacted by the Parliament of the Republic of Fiji.
Secretary General.
Consideration of bills.
Honourable members, I now call upon the Attorney General and Minister for Economy, Civil Service and Communications to move his motion. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, pursuant to a resolution of Parliament on Thursday, 3rd of July 2020, I now move that the Fijian Competition and Consumer Commission Budget Amendment Bill 2020 be debated, voted upon and be passed. Thank you, sir.
Is there a seconder?
Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to second the motion.
Honourable members, I now call on the Honourable Attorney General to speak to his motion. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, as we discussed earlier this morning and as also discussed in the budget, we have made a number of announcements, over 1,600 line items, where the duties actually have been either completely been eradicated or they've been reduced quite significantly. And of course, we have STT being removed. Stamp duty, Mr. Speaker, sir, of course, has been removed. However, Mr. Speaker, sir, as we've seen previously, a number of occasions when we've reduced duties quite significantly, the reason for doing so is to ensure that that reduction in duty is passed on as a reduced price to the end user or the end consumer. So the consumer must actually benefit from that reduction in duty. Unfortunately, as highlighted also, that a number of times, a number of businesses, given the way that the market structure is in Fiji, a lot of the products in Fiji are imported only by one particular company. They have what we call a sole agency. If you go to a number of other jurisdictions like Australia and New Zealand, you won't actually find, for example, only one dealer for a particular brand of car. There are many importers of a particular brand of car. In Fiji, for example, there's only one dealer in a particular brand of car. So there's not much competition. Similarly, we see with various food items, because there's only one importer, or they've got the sole agency for example, bringing a particular cereal, even though the duty on cereal was reduced, the price of cereal actually did not come down, notwithstanding the fact that the Fijian currency did not go down in value, that all other input costs actually did not go up at all. So despite that, the price was still either remained the same, or in fact they increased it, so they're eating a lot more fat. In the end, intended recipient of that reduction, the consumer did not get the benefit. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, I would like to table this bill accordingly, Mr. Speaker, or as already tabled, that to ensure that businesses pass on this duty and tax reductions, we are proposing an amendment to the Fijian Competition Consumer Commission Act to establish an offence for businesses to not reflect duty and tax reduction in the goods and services, and to empower the FCCC to monitor the market and enforce this requirement. We've actually ring-fenced it. We said for the 2 years, immediately after the reduction, because eventually we want the market to actually, do what it does best, which is competition. But for at least the first 2 years, FCCC can monitor these particular products. And indeed, we will urge them to publish the pricing of these goods, so you know what's actually happening. Mr. Speaker, so this offence is actually currently similar to the current offences under Customs Act 1986, the Value Added Tax 1991, which are monitored and enforced by the FRCS. However, Mr. Speaker, sir, given the realities of the market and given the market information and intelligence gathering that FCCC does, in any case, is normal part of its work, they are better suited for monitoring and enforcing this particular policy. So therefore, Mr. Speaker, sir, the FCCC seeks to amend the Budget Amendment Bill seeks to amend the Fijian Competition Consumer Commission Act to ensure that the duty and tax reductions are felt and experienced by the ordinary Fijians, and to allow FCCC to effectively monitor these prices. It's actually quite simple. I mean, in the same way, for example, I just wanted to highlight, we have actually protection for tin fish, because we actually do canning of tin fish. Some of it is sold, a lot of it is exported. However, what we have done, Mr. Speaker, sir, we've taken a more nuanced approach. So like things like sardines or salmon and other types of fish that we actually don't can in Fiji, they've been reduced to 5%. But the ones that we actually do can, they've actually been given a competitive advantage by having a 32% protection against it. So next time you go to the supermarket, the price of the sardines and the salmon must come down, because the duty rate has been reduced from 32 to 5%. I know Honourable Gengari Tumbu, I was not in Parliament, had raised some issues about, because we reduced duties, maybe the price of the bad tin fish will come in. But that's where the monitoring is taking place. Ministry of Health and the other Ministry of Commerce and Trade looks at things like standards, and they look at the goods that come into Fiji. So for example, there is now a regulation in place that should you bring in food items that has none of the ingredients stated in the English language, it must be stated in the English language, because we must know what we are consuming. So those kind of safeguards are already built into the law, and that's the type of protections we have. I was quite astounded. One of the lawyers from the law firm that they use, put on their Facebook page, they said, the minister naming me in person, saying that if he wants the price to come down, then maybe he should go and sell the hair dryer himself. He uses hair dryer, of course, he did not mention food. If he wants the price to come down at the local hotels, then he should go and mix the cocktails himself. I mean, it's really preposterous and quite stupid, actually, to make those kind of comments, because we want this to be actually passed on to the ordinary consumer. We want the market to be a lot more robust. Ultimately, as a philosophy, we don't actually want to do price control if there's enough competition. But because the ground realities in Fiji is such that we have monopolistic positions, duopolistic positions, we actually have had in the past cartelling. So we need FCCC to be able to ensure that that does not happen. The companies can go off and make their profits, but our philosophy has always been, Mr. Speaker, sir, lower margin, higher turnover. Lower margin, higher turnover. Sell more goods, you'll make a lot more money. In the same way, for example, if you're going to import a shower head, you need to have a good price on it so ordinary Fijians can buy the new shower head. Don't make it so expensive that only the rich people afford it. We don't want, people who are low-income families to be recycling nails. In the same way, we want our people to be able to ensure, if we've zero-rated duty on almonds and those types of things, and various other products, we want them to be able to buy those products. And so FCCC being empowered to do so is critically important to ensure not only the passing on of the reduction of the duty, but also to create much better competition in the market. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
I thank the Honourable Attorney General. Floor is open. Anyone wishing to take the floor? Honourable Attorney General, I give you the floor for your right of reply.
Thank you, sir. I have nothing further to add. Thank you.
Honourable members, the Parliament will now vote. The question is, pursuant to resolution of Parliament on Thursday, 30th July 2020, that the Fijian Competition and Consumer Commission Budget Amendment Bill 2020 be debated, voted upon and be passed. Does any member oppose the motion? As no member opposes, the motion is agreed to unanimously. Secretary General.
A bill for an act to amend the Fijian Competition and Consumer Commission Act 2010, Bill number 30 of 2020, enacted by the Parliament of the Republic of Fiji.
Secretary General.
Presentation of papers and certain documents.
Honourable members, I now call upon the Attorney General and Minister for Economy, Civil Service and Communications, the Honourable Ayaz Syed Qayyum, to table his reports. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, in accordance with Standing Order 38, I present the following reports to Parliament. 1. The third quarter appropriation statement for the period 1st February 2020 to 30th April 2020. 2. The Office of the Auditor General report on the performance audit on the administrative and management of the bus fare assistance through e-ticketing for the school children, disabled and the elderly. 3. The 2019 Fiji Development Bank annual report. And 4. The 2017-2018 Fiji Correction Services annual report. Thank you, sir.
Please hand the reports to the Secretary General. Honourable members, under Standing Order 38, Clause 2, I refer the following reports to the Standing Committee on Public Accounts. 1. Third quarter appropriation statement for the period 1st February 2020 to 30th April 2020. And 2. Office of the Auditor General report on the performance audit on the administrative and management of the bus fare assistance through e-ticketing for the school children, disabled and the elderly. Under Standing Order 38, Clause 2, I refer the 2019 Fiji Development Bank Annual Report to the Standing Committee on Economic Affairs. Under Standing Orders 38, Clause 2, I refer the 2017-2018 Fiji Correction Services Annual Report to the Standing Committee on Justice, Law and Human Rights. Honourable members, I now call upon the Minister for Infrastructure, Meteorological Services, Lands and Mineral Resources, the Honourable Chone Usumate, to table his reports. You have the floor, sir.
Mr. Speaker, sir, in accordance with Standing Order 38, I present to Parliament the 2015 and 2016 to 2017 Ministry of Infrastructure and Transport annual reports.
Please hand the reports to the Secretary General. Under Standing Orders 38, Clause 2, I refer the 2015 and the 2016-2017 Ministry of Infrastructure and Transport annual reports to the Standing Committee on Social Affairs. Honourable members, I now call upon the Minister for Commerce, Trade, Tourism and Transport, the Honourable Faiz Koya, to table his reports. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, in accordance with Standing Order 38, I present the following reports to Parliament. 1, 2017-2018 and the 2018-2019 Investment Fiji Annual Reports. And 2, the 2017-2018 Consumer Council of Fiji Annual Report. Thank you, sir.
Please hand the reports to the Secretary General. Secretary General. Under Standing Orders 38, Clause 2, I refer the 2017-2018 and the 2018-2019 Investment Fiji Annual Reports to the Standing Committee on Economic Affairs. Under Standing Orders 38, Clause 2, I refer the 2017-2018 Consumer Council of Fiji Annual Report to the Standing Committee on Social Affairs. Honourable members, I now call upon the Minister for Forestry, the Honourable Osea Nangam, to table his reports. You have the floor, sir.
Honourable Speaker, in accordance with Standing Order 38, I present the 2014 and 2015 annual reports for the Department of Forestry.
Please hand the reports to the Secretary General. Under Standing Orders 38, Clause 2, I refer the 2014 and 2015 annual reports for the Department of Forestry to the Standing Committee on Natural Resources. Secretary General.
Adjournment.
I now call on the Leader of Government in Parliament to move the adjournment motion. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I move that Parliament adjourns until Monday, 31st August 2020 at 9:30 a.m.
Is there a seconder?
Honourable Speaker, I beg to second the motion.
Honourable members, the Parliament will now vote. The question is that Parliament adjourns until Monday, 31st August 2020 at 9:30 a.m. Does any member oppose the motion? Since no member opposes the motion is agreed to unanimously. Honourable members, I thank you for your contributions to the budget process, and I congratulate you all for the passing of the 2020-2021 national budget. I reiterate the advisory from the Ministry of Health with respect to the life-saving measures and protocols that are in place nationwide. The war against COVID-19 is far from over. Therefore, I urge all honourable members and all those watching the live proceedings that we must adhere to the measures and the protocols. Honourable members, on that note, Parliament is adjourned until Monday, 31st August 2020 at 9:30 a.m. Thank you.